My name is Richie, Bella Vista Vineyards. This is my wife Tracy. For over the last 2 years, my wife Tracy and I have been allowing our VRBO guests to hold weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, all sorts of Terra, along with some charity events. Along with those events, you've heard we've donated in excess of maybe $400,000 in the last 2.5 years to enable these charities to use the venue at no charge, including our staff and everything. We invested a substantial amount of money to improve the grounds and create an amazing experience based on the premise originally that VRBOs were allowed to hold events, and still are, except for the Adelaide district. And because of that large investment, we need to hold 35 events annually just to maintain our debt service and everything else that goes with it. I'd like to show you some pictures of the property. I don't know how we can bring those up. How they were, oh, they're there. So, I think you can see the extent of we could just kind of flow through them, the extent of the improvements and in the landscape. You want to do that? Yes. Oh. Oh. But anyway, so yeah, there. It's a nice picture. Okay, so anyway, once it was made clear that the county was considering a future ordinance requiring permits for this type of operating, we immediately, as soon as we felt there was an ordinance that would even be thought about being drafted, and obviously seeing what happened in the Adelaide district, we immediately decided to step up and apply for this minor use permit, even though an ordinance stopping us from operating the way we are could be years away. We just wanted to get ahead of it. And throughout the entire time the events were taking place, we consistently checked with all surrounding neighbors to make sure they were not bothered by any noise created from these events. My wife Tracy would email, call, leave notes in their mailboxes to check with them, like all the time. We bought 2 decibel meters to monitor sound constantly from every side of our property. Every event, we're constantly well under the limits of the county's requirements. During a local group tour of our property, some folks wanted to tour the property. My wife met a distant neighbor, Mrs. Nancy Boletto, and she suggested that sometimes she would hear some noise from our events. Well, we're confused because of how far away they were, but we immediately got into contact and followed up with them. We scheduled a meeting with them, and as Mr. Kramer from Kramer Events told you, we hired them to come out to the space, set up all their system, and play at typical wedding levels. We then traveled back and forth to their property and our property. In fact, they were with some other neighbors, the Snows, and we went back and forth checking speaker direction. He was on the microphone, because sometimes they said the microphone would be louder than the music. And mind you, while we were on their property, trying to listen for the music from our property, we heard a train, which is way farther away, in 46 West traffic, which seemed to tower over any music we could possibly get from our venue. But anyway, we still wanted to accommodate them any way we were, and we were shocked to learn that after all this, we were still getting some letters of opposition from these 2 folks, and there's 2 letters from them, I guess. We're certainly not complaining, but this application has been very expensive and has required quite a bit of effort and diligence for us. Along with the expense of the application fees, the traffic studies, the noise studies, consultants, we've now had the burden of all of our, neighbors and some community members to leave their workplaces in the middle of harvest. They have vineyards and, selflessly spend their morning here today to support our effort. More than 15 folks that cannot be here, now it's 20, graciously wrote support letters, which you're now in possession of. So neither of which are duplicated, the letters or the attendance. I'd like to point out that, again, there's either a letter of support present here, a letter of support or a neighbor present from every surrounding property to Bella Vista. So each and every surrounding bordering property, even across the street, there's representations of support here. The most important thing to Tracy and I is to live out the rest of our life in this paradise we found in SLO County and be in total harmony with neighbors. We just love where we live. We love the community. And I'm hoping that that's been displayed here this morning, with some of the neighbors and such. We've a big desire to give back to the community and utilize the property we were blessed with, to continue to help local charities and hold fundraising events and watch young couples start their lives together on that property. The charities you've heard about, this is the big gala that the director was here, and we were able to raise over $200,000 at this gala alone. We've done some stuff, pink motorcycle run for cancer support. We do a roast, which is kind of fun, where we roast somebody who's a unique member of the community, and we've benefited over $40,000 to Must Charities for a couple of these events, and now it's with the cancer support community. But lastly, the thing I wanna really get to is the fact that the economic benefit to our venue brings to SLO County is pretty huge. Virtually all of the weddings that will take place or have taken place just with 125 people from other counties, not this county. These almost 90% of our weddings are from other counties. And the money they bring in, if it's just a 125 person wedding, to the hotel rooms, restaurants, caterers, florists, rental companies, hair and makeup, wine and beer, wait staff, car rentals, Uber drivers, shuttle services, coordinators, DJs, and many other services, we estimate, and a good estimate, of more than $75,000 per wedding, or over $2.5 million annually with the 35 events, are brought to SLO County just from our venue alone. And I think that's important to note. So with all that, my wife and Tracy, me and my wife Tracy, we just humbly request the approval of this, minor use permit as applied for. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I do have a few questions. Sure. So the first, the conditions of approval for Exhibit B limits parking, and it only authorizes up to 40 vehicles. How have you been limiting this at your previous events? How do you plan to ensure that number is limited?
Well, believe it or not, we don't have to do too much to do that, because we monitored, and I've got the parking attendants keep a count every month. We have never really exceeded like 42 cars. A lot of people ride share, they take shuttles, they Uber because they don't want to drive back to their places. So, but how we will enforce it to make sure it never gets over the 40 we're agreeing to here is we're going to put in our contracts with with whoever does the event that there's a limit of cars and that they need to entertain shuttles and everything. So, yes.
And does this number include staff?
Yes.
That's in addition to staff?
Yeah. Oh, staff, we all ask the staff to carpool, the caterers to carpool as well.
So condition number 4, I just kind of want to point this out so that you are aware, discusses exterior lighting. Details shall include height, location, intensity of all exterior lighting, and I understand from just events that I've been to in my life, photographs can be kind of brightened using the expertise of the photographer, but please ensure that that lighting is downlit and meets all standards of the ordinance. There were a couple pictures that made it kind of look a little bit bright, so just kind of want to point that out.
Those were Google enhancement photos, but just
no, I understand, but I just want you to be aware that it looks like there is some uplighting on a few of the trees for wayfinding, for purposes of safety. I find that they're very necessary, but be sure to read the conditions carefully and make sure that we're standing by those. Let's see, I have a couple of other questions. I really appreciate what you've done with measuring the noise, as well as hiring an industry professional to come out and play so that you can kind of monitor that at the property lines and engaging with your neighbors to test what those noise levels would be. I appreciate staff putting that up on their presentation. One question I have is, have you already identified an on-site manager for each of these events?
Yes.
Is that yourself? It sounds like you're the one.
It's myself with 2 additional on-site people that are
Okay.
with me all the time.
Okay, great. Okay, and just to kind of reiterate what's already been spoken by staff, but for members of the public who are here today, if there are any issues with the project, you can contact code enforcement. They are available on Fridays as well as weekends. It says that as an alternative to providing the annual listing of the events in a letter, a website may be used. I was scrolling through the multiple websites that, so Wedding Wire, The Knot, etc. And I just kind of wanted to make sure that you were aware that some say that there's allowed up to 175 individuals. So depending on what action I take today, just ensure that whatever that number is, or results in, that all of those are advertised as conditioned.
Sure.
And so for the events that you have, that you've hosted over the years, what would you say is the average number of attendees?
Probably right around 120, 125.
Okay. And do most go until 10 p.m.? Is it kind of a mixture, or does it really depend on the type of event?
The type of events. The weddings typically, they want to go till midnight.
Yeah.
So, no, the weddings typically will go, but they really thin out by the 8:30. And then they start thinning out, but there's always the bride, and everybody wants to stay down, right?
What is the makeup of the events throughout the year? Is it a mixture of nonprofits, industry-wide events, and private events, or is it very heavily catered to weddings, to private events?
Heavier on the wedding side.
Okay. Okay. I believe that that's all the questions I have, unless your agent would like to speak to anything. Okay, please.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yay, so I don't even have to go to the podium. Okay, so I just wanted to point out a couple quick things. This is a map. The site there is in yellow off of the county's permit view. And every green dot represents a landowner that has either spoken in support of this project, written a letter in support, or has confirmed otherwise that they have no issues with this project. The orange dots represent the few objections that we have, either people who spoke in opposition or sent letters. And so I just wanted to note that this is one of the rare situations where every single immediately adjacent property owner has no issue with the application. Those who did lodge their objections are somewhat distant. Mr. Hogue, who spoke this morning, is that orange dot way at the top there. And then the 2 letters, one of the orange dots, I believe she wrote a letter but did not speak. Same with the other, and That farthest to the right orange dot is the property, which is actually being sold, and the letter writer is in the process of moving. There were 2 other letters that came in from property owners located way to the south. Those were the 2 letters from the Evans, plus Mr. and Mrs. Webster. And that is South Bethel Road right there. So to get to their properties from the wedding venue, it's about a 4 to 6 mile distance down there. And I believe that both of those letter writers admitted that they do not themselves feel any impacts from this project. It is simply that they're concerned about precedent setting from this project. And so in response to that, I just want to note that, as you're aware, minor use permits are highly individualized processes, and so there's very little concern, or should be very little concern by the public, that the conditions that are imposed on this project, or the standards that are set, will somehow set some precedent for a different project. Every minor use permit is based on individualized situations like geography, location, neighbors, setting, etc. And so setting the limit of the events here at 35 or setting the amplified music hours has no bearing on what will happen with future applications that come in. The other thing I wanted to note is that with regard to noise, that seems to be the primary concern in the applicant the amplified music. The noise study is in the record for this, and it's very clear that at the property lines there were 7 measurements taken, and those were done on a Saturday evening from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. while a maximum sized wedding was going on, and it showed that the average at the property line never exceeded 48 decibels, and that the max events at the property line didn't get above, I think, 50 to 60. The other important thing to note is that the noise is funneled in the canyon, and so if you look at the exhibits to the noise study, figure 1 and figure 2, which I'm sure Holly can provide, the noise is actually funneled away from all of those properties that lodged objections. And as you are aware, the county's noise study sets limits for both the maximum single noise event and also the hourly average that are intended to prevent people from noise at levels that would harm their wellness and their well-being. So in other words, levels that would interfere with sleep, cause agitation, and even up to hearing loss. And so the county's noise ordinance is not intended to prevent people from hearing any noise at all on their property. And I think that that's what most of these complaints are about. They're not about noise exceeding the county standards. They're just the very fact that they can hear any noise at all from these projects. And that is not actually a relevant basis for conditioning or denying this application. And then the final thing that I wanted to note is that a couple people made reference in the speakers to previous code violations of the property. That's actually not a proper consideration for today on whether to grant or deny the use permit. There are 2 cases on point: Eureka Citizens for Responsible Government v. Citizens of the City of Eureka, and also Riverwatch v. San Diego County, which say that the fact that that there's an enforcement agency working on prior illegal or unpermitted activities on the site has no bearing on a new permit that is under consideration by the planning department. And then finally, I just wanted to say that we feel that the conditions of approval here are appropriate. However, any more restrictive conditions, such as changes to the hours of amplified noise that are allowed from 7 to 10, or changes to the number of events that are allowed from 35, really need to be supported by evidence of external impacts that justify further restriction, not just that certain neighbors might prefer it or not. In this case, both the noise study and the traffic study showed that there are no external impacts that meet any established threshold that the county has. Therefore, it does not seem that there's anything other than the individual preference of some neighbors by which to further restrict this project. The chart that staff provided was very helpful, but I would say that those conditions, again, are highly dependent. And also, they have to be feasible. What's feasible for one site as far as the number of events that they have, it may not be feasible. Obviously, Green Gate was a huge investment. In order for them to be able to get the return on investment, they needed a huge number. Other ones in there have fewer events per year, but you'll notice some of them have way more attendees than we are proposing. So I would just say that it's very difficult to apply precedent from other sites to this site because it's very unique in what the property owners have tried to do with it. That said, I'm happy to answer any questions, but we encourage you and hope that you will take staff's conditions as recommended and approve the project. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to close public comment.
Oh,
Sorry. Linda Gilbert. We have one speaker slip.
Okay, my name is Linda Gilbert, and they were just discussing the code violation, which was filed in July of 2017, and he didn't file for this permit until December of 2017. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who did not speak at the previous open public comment that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment officially, and I'm going to bring it back to staff. Staff, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving a very brief overview of the code enforcement case and kind of how that process works, just to kind of inform the public on when a code enforcement case is opened and how we come to amend this issue.
Okay, I'll give you the history, and then Ms.
Thank
Knoll
you.
will be able to provide some additional guidance on how we work together with code enforcement to get projects through.
Thank you.
So on this property, when I pulled up the case history, there was a code enforcement case opened in June 2015 for grading for a pond without a permit. That was taken care of, and that was closed on July 15th because the permit was not required because it's less than an acre foot. Then a zoning clearance in 2014, which allowed the vacation rental. A code enforcement case was opened July 2017 for holding events with up to 200 people without an approved land use permit. Then the applicant came in and submitted a minor use permit application in December 2017. And the code enforcement case will be cleared up if this project gets approved.
Thank you very much.
And regarding the temporary events and stuff, how they work.
If you, hi Karen Knoll with the Planning Division. I call it the vacation rental event loophole. So private parties at vacation rentals, that was considered not something we could regulate because it was truly a, you know, I'm renting your vacation rental, I'm having a few friends over. However, it evolved, expanded, and once we saw that folks were marketing their sites as event venues, not vacation rentals, that's when code enforcement had that judgment call that maybe this really isn't a vacation rental, maybe this is, I'm not saying this particular site, but in general, it is an event venue, and I believe we started a code enforcement case. I applaud this applicant's coming in to regulate, to get on the books before, if and when a vacation or a temporary event ordinance is ever drafted by the county.
Last and final question. I have a staff, please. These 35 events, they would include industry-wide events. There would be additional events allowed for this winery outside of this. No, this would be it.
venue is not a winery. This is a vineyard only. There's
Thank you.
no winery, no industry-wide. So this applicant can
Is
is non-profit
and private.
and private, which
Great.
includes the 35 total
Okay.
events.
Okay, great. I understand that we've all been here since this morning, but I am going to take a 2-minute recess for individuals to use the restroom, and I need to ask some additional questions of staff. I appreciate your patience, and if you could come back in 2 minutes, I would appreciate it.